Welcome to Scaling Impact, where we decode how entrepreneurs are harnessing the power of the UN Sustainable Development Goals to create remarkable and impactful businesses that drive transformation on a global and local human scale. We explore how sustainability is elevating our human consciousness and catalyzing us to create within constraints. We decipher why now is the biggest entrepreneurial opportunity since the dawn of industrialization and what leaders and entrepreneurs can do to harness the winds of change. I'm Anders Sorma-Nielsen, global futurist, EO Sydney Impact Champion and father, and your co-host with Lisa Andrews for Scaling Impact.
Our guest for today is Nancy Youssef. Nancy is a multiple award-winning finance strategist and founder of Classic Finance, a boutique finance firm based in Sydney. She's an energetic philanthropist and ambassador of the work of the Hunger Project Australia, raising money to fund microfinance loans and help build resilience and business skills in some of the poorest corners of the world. She's also the author of Fear, Money, Purpose. Tune in as we unearth Nancy's passion on how she is leveraging the UN SDGs to scale impact. Welcome, Nancy. Today we are talking about SDG number 2 around world hunger. Would you like to start and share why you're passionate about world hunger and solving world hunger?
Well, I guess it didn't start off just specifically about world hunger, Lisa. I mean, in 2015, I'd been looking in my business about what sort of charities we could support. And after having done the rounds and talking to a few different charities, I was getting a little bit demotivated in that, you know, as a small business, I wasn't sure if we really could make any impact. Outside of writing a check and making donations to some local charities, we'd never really embarked on that philanthropic journey until I realised in 2015 that we could actually do more. And it was when I became aware of the Hunger Project and the work of the Hunger Project. And one of their big missions is about ending world hunger. So I didn't specifically go out on a passionate trip looking to solve world hunger. It's just, I guess, happened through my own journey of wanting to have a business that stood for more than just profit.
I always love hearing about people's journey and when they actually find out about a big challenge that they want to solve. And so for world hunger for myself, it was actually, if we talk macro statistics for a moment, there's somewhere between 600 million and a billion people who go to bed with food insecurity every day. And I think when you learn about some of these challenges, it's really interesting to, I guess, the process that you go through to how you can implement within your business or then align your business with something like that. And in Australia, I didn't even realise that there's about 9% of the population in Australia who go to bed with food insecurity every day, which is an alarming statistic given that we're 25 million population. And so it's interesting sort of learning about this. And I haven't really learnt much about the Hunger Project. And so would you like to share some of the things that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I first came across the work of the Hunger Project just being part of a couple of different organisations, such as Business Chicks was where I first heard about them. And then I had a number of friends and colleagues, entrepreneurs, who had undertaken these incredible, what they call leadership immersion programs where, you know, some of my friends had been off to Uganda or India and seen firsthand the work of the Hunger Project. And it was hearing about those experiences and those transformational leadership experiences that I thought to myself, geez, I'd really love to go along on one of those one day. Now, I guess where that started was personally, I don't have children. And so there was this word around legacy and, you know, what am I going to be remembered for? Certainly I had, you know, a finance business which, you know, helps people and helps people, you know, come up with funding, whether it's for business or for, you know, shelter or homes or their dream home. And the mentoring business that I've got through Classic Mentoring also gives back to our industry in helping support startups. But what I really wanted was something more than just a business to be remembered for. And I think it became a personal mission of mine to align with a charity. And looking at the work of the Hunger Project, the reason I chose them was because they do the synergy that we've got with what we do here in Australia commercially is what they do in impoverished communities. So it's all about empowerment. And when I looked at our journey of working with our clients, it's about empowerment. It's about educating them around money, giving them accessibility to the money they needed to grow their wealth or to achieve their goals. But on the mentoring front, we were also empowering a lot of our mentees or our startups to succeed in business. So giving them a hand up and helping them and teaching them, how to fish. So it's those very skills that in that very activity we do here commercially that I found we had a synergy with what the Hunger Project does in impoverished communities. And so the fit felt incredible, and I wanted to embark on that journey and invest and be known for more than just what we do here.
That's brilliant. I'd love to know a little bit more about your history personally.
Personally, we haven't got that much time, Lisa, but I wear a number of different hats. I mean, I was one of these entrepreneurs who jumped into her own business before I was 30. I've run that first business under Classic Finance for about 18 years. In 2011, after the GFC, I thought that business wasn't enough. I needed to set up a second one. And so off I went and started Classic Mentoring. We fast became, very reputable for helping create a pathway for startups in the finance broking industry. And fast forward just under a decade, we've mentored just over 150 startups. Very pleased with that, and with the mentees that have graduated from our program, who've also gone on to win, to be award-winning businesses and making impact in their own communities. And I guess the journey I'm on now, 2019 saw me pivot again, launched my first book, which is called Fear, Money, Purpose, and really now work with businesses who are looking at, creating, finding a legacy and creating purpose within their own businesses outside of what they do commercially. So that's sort of me in a nutshell. I do wear a few different hats, as you've probably seen, but I'm very passionate about empowerment. And I think seeing the work that we've done in 2017, it was a huge eye-opener for me to go to Malawi with the Hunger Project and see firsthand on ground the work that they do. And it's honestly transformational. And for me, that was it just gave me I'd already been working with investing in the Hunger Project since 2015, but seeing firsthand what, an entrepreneur having access to microfinance could mean to their future and the generational change that can take place, I guess further strengthened my commitment to their work. And so that's the journey I've been on through my business, and really advocating and being an ambassador for small businesses that want to make change. For a long time, I believed that as a small business owner, well, what change? I mean, we can't even make a dent in trying to help end world hunger, let alone, who's little old me kind of thing. And so I guess seeing when collectively 10 or 12 entrepreneurs came together after our trip in 2017, and we've brought a community in Malawi, in Charlo, to self-reliance at the end of 2020, was a huge goal for us to have achieved, just as a small collective group of entrepreneurs that agreed that we could make it happen.
I'm getting a huge theme of wanting to help here throughout your history and your past and where you're at now. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened on that trip specifically?
As in the logistical side, or what I went through, I guess, from my own realization of the fact that we can make change?
I guess share what it was like. What was the community like? What were the people like? What were they actually doing, and how were you able to make a difference?
So we were briefed a couple of times. I mean, we were very well, I guess, groomed and trained for what we were to expect. I had never been to Africa. It was not even a place I'd ever thought I'd visit. And so I was a little bit apprehensive. I mean, obviously you go through a lot of the preparation for what you're going to experience. But they positioned it. So the Hunger Project actually positioned it with the locals, that this group coming from Australia is here to learn about, survival and how, you run business here. And so I guess going over to Malawi was, we visited 3 towns. And the first town we visited had already achieved self-reliance through these programs that the Hunger Project runs. So they run these 8-year programs which create epicenters and towns where they essentially have an economy that's running. And it usually involves things like education, mindset change, the belief that you can actually do this, you can pull yourself out of poverty, and it all starts with mindset. And the trained facilitators on ground are incredible. They do a wonderful job. And so seeing a town that was already flourishing and prosperous because of the work of the Hunger Project, we then visited another town which had, and I can't remember the order that we did it, but we visited another town that had just embarked on that journey. So they hadn't even started. So seeing the vast difference between one town and another was already, the contrast was huge. But then we visited Nchalo, and Nchalo had gone through 4 years out of the 8 years and then run out of money. And so they were in this holding pattern. And you could just see that they had this belief that we actually can pull ourselves out of poverty, but we've run out of money and we need help. And that was where at that moment, and I remember meeting, and I write about this in my book, I met Martha. And Martha is a young woman with 4 children whose husband had moved to another town to work, which is quite normal in these towns. And he'd moved to another town to work and never come back. And so this woman, was infected with HIV. She'd already had some treatment through being able to access that treatment. And when I asked her, sitting on a dirt ground with a bamboo mat, what's your dream home look like? She said to me, my dream home would be a house with brick and a tin roof. And I said, where's your house now? And she showed it to me, and it was a house just made of clay and straw. And she said every time it rained, the water would come in and affect her and the kids. And when I asked the interpreter, so how much would this house cost? And he said to me, it's about $280. All I could think about was how many pairs of shoes and things I've bought for $280. And this was the difference between somebody having shelter and somebody not. And I realized at that point, that I can actually make change. And even if I can't make massive change, there is enough I can do through my business to be able to, impact 100 or 200 people that I could.
It's interesting, actually, the contrast that you're sharing. And I think there's a very stark difference between living in Australia or in a place where you haven't had to worry about food or shelter like that versus a developing nation who have not known any different. And so thinking about the mindset and your shared mindset, was there a mindset shift between those 2 communities? And how far back do you think into the past has it been the same mindset? And the shift that you saw, was that permanent?
Look, you could definitely see the positivity and the energy. And I guess the thing is that a lot of these communities are run predominantly by women, because the men are off working and some, as I said, a lot of them will leave towns too. And so being in finance and having that money hat, I got to interview the regional bank manager, and she's a female. And, typically a lot of the board for these regional banks are made up of women. And, just seeing their resilience and their strength and their ability to just with some very small resources. I mean, they don't need a lot to make change, but just the power of resilience and, their ability to embrace that change and have that belief and rally together as a community to make that change is huge, because, again, we're giving them the tools to help bring them out of poverty. And they have that belief, and all it took was just that little bit of momentum to build up, and they're so proud, of what they've been able to achieve. So when I'm having a pretty bad day here, it's a good little wake-up call when I think back on we've obviously got our stresses and everything is relative, but when you see how little people actually need to survive, it puts things into perspective. And it certainly changed my perspective on a lot of things coming back in terms of what's really important.
I'm actually really worried about the future and the amount we're going to know about some of these world challenges. And so you talk about a house compared to a pair of shoes for $280. And it's once you see it, I think you need to help. And I was reading in a book recently, there was a story, and it was about a person that they were walking past a river and they saw somebody drowning. And when you're walking past the river, then absolutely you're going to take the opportunity to help that person, and it's going to be slightly inconvenient. So you might jump in and you might rescue them and you've saved someone's life. And then there's a mindset shift. So if you actually know that that is happening 10 minutes away and you could get to them, would you actually make the effort to jump in a car and then go and then save that person? And absolutely, it's going to be an inconvenience in your world. But then when you know that it's happening around the world or 100 kilometers away or 1,000 kilometers away, it's really easy to feel helpless that you can't actually do something. And I think about the population of 3 billion people in developed nations versus 5 billion people in developing nations. I guess at what point do we bound together, or can we utilize technology or think about things differently to be able to help everyone? And so thinking about the next 10 years, when we're going to hear more of these stories, we're going to know more about the tragedy that's happening in the world. How is it that you've aligned your business, and any advice on anyone for dealing with their own mindset on how they might be able to help?
I think, Lisa, that's a really good question, because when I reflect on my own journey, the first mindset change I had to have was I do have the ability. Philanthropy is not for governments, or, we certainly see that, or for, just the big corporate guys. Philanthropy can actually be done, and at small business level. And I think being that, even our own economy is underpinned by over 60% of entrepreneurs and business owners. We, I believe, are the solution to change. We are the solution. Now, when you put it into those statistics, well, I, myself, Nancy, can't save 3 billion people. And that's not the intent. The intent for me is to show what is possible for a small business owner to do if they have the desire and the passion to help. But I haven't done it on my own either. And that's where I say the power of collaboration is so important. When I look at the work of the Hunger Project and the community that I guess we went to Malawi, there were maybe 12, 13 of us who are all entrepreneurs, different sized businesses. Some could do more than others. But it was the fact that we shared values, we shared the belief, we shared the passion that this doesn't have to be this way for this particular community of 37,000 people. Was it daunting for us to say, yes, in the next 3 years, we're going to bring this community to self-reliance? Of course it was. Did it not feel like we were all pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone? Absolutely. Did I not have moments where I thought, I'm crazy, why did I commit to this? For sure. Were there times when I was so stressed in the BAU that I just didn't have time to think about, well, I've got to add this? No. But what I found is that because I'm so passionate about the work of the Hunger Project, and that's why I keep saying you've got to find a cause that really resonates with you, because it's no longer then a to-do. It's no longer an action item. It's actually what you do. And it's being able to achieve what I've done with the work of the Hunger Project that's given me the energy to keep going in my own business to ensure that it is successful and sustainable, because the more that I can give to that business, the more that business will enable me to give back. And so when I fall out of love with things I'm doing, or I'm feeling a little bit challenged, I just have to think about that work. And it does energize me to want to keep going and giving back. And I think that's the difference, where it's not writing a check. This is a partnership. And when I look at the community of us, a small group that came together and meet regularly and keep each other motivated to say, hey, we're almost there, that was a huge thing to help us bring Charlo to self-reliance. And since that's happened, I actually sat and I got sad because I go, oh, we're done, job's done, what's next? And so I've signed another contract now with the Hunger Project with another group of people to bring a community in Ghana, in a town called Akodi, to self-reliance by 2025. And so knowing that that's my next goal, and knowing that we've already done it with a small group, and now we've got another group and people I'm getting to know for a common goal again. So you don't have to do it on your own, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting the action there on collaboration. I've also got the message of finding what's important to you. And I know we're talking about World Hunger today, and there's a lot of different projects out there and organisations that are doing amazing things in the world. I guess for some of our listeners, they might be wondering if they're going to actually do something towards the SDGs within their business versus join in with an organisation that really exists outside of their business. How did you make that decision? And is all of the team within your business committed to the Hunger Project as well?
Yeah, good question. I didn't strategically have a plan. I'll be honest with you, Lisa. I have just found my way as I've gone with this whole journey. If you had asked me in 2015, I blindly went in and just thought, I've been so blessed. I'd had an incredible year in the business. We were growing. It was the year I'd been able to go to Necker Island, and I was feeling all just, grand in the business because I'd achieved a lot of goals that year. And I thought, I'm so blessed. And it was as innocently as saying, for my birthday this year, I don't want any gifts. I want to do something really incredible for the universe. And my birthday's in November. And so I remember it was September, and I decided in 5 weeks to host my first event. And at that event, I set myself a personal pledge to raise $50,000 that I would donate to the work of the Hunger Project. I didn't know what I was doing. I was completely out of my scope. And off I went and held that event. And I literally went through my black book and called everybody I knew that could help with sponsorship or services for the event. And we did. We raised $50,000, and I realized, wow, you can actually manifest this, if you want it so badly. And so the next year I did another event. And fast forward now 7 years, we're doing our 7th event in 5 weeks' time here in Sydney. But it's just through those events that I've been able to raise that we've raised just last year we hit our goal, which was over 200,000. But for me, it's what I mentioned earlier is that why I chose the Hunger Project is because of the synergy. It's because of the work that they do. Felt that it aligned really well with the work that we do here commercially. In terms of getting the team on board, absolutely. I mean, I used to sit at the start of each year and say, look, rest assured, we will be doing an event this year, and it would be all systems go. And we donate all our time, we donate our resources to that. It's great for the team because, they know that it's what we stand for. Now I don't really have a team because I've made such big changes, as you know, in the last 18 months in my business. And so I'm sort of a solopreneur all over again. And I'm now pulling in all our contractors and people that work with us to help out.
And so what's your vision for how this might look in the next 5 to 10 years' time?
Look, I think the vision I've got is, me personally, I'd love to be able to put together a collective of a group to go over to Africa. I really think collaboration is the way to do this. I think if you're on your own, you will get moments where you think, this is bigger than me. And, it can be quite scary. But again, I just believe that you don't have to set yourself a big target and set yourself up for failure. It's just about those small incremental goals that you can set. And each year I just challenged myself just to push that little bit more. And, it doesn't even look anything like what it did 6 years ago, but it's even more exciting. And so I think having that community that works with you certainly can help.
And what about stories? Are the Hunger Project sharing a lot of stories out to encourage people in the community?
Absolutely. If there's something that they do well, it's storytelling. There's a lot of information on their website. They're always open to coming out and doing presentations to teams. And I mean, they're just and I think, being that I call it a partnership because it really is. I mean, I've gotten to know, it's not just a charity where it's over there and I don't know anybody. I mean, I know the CEO, I've gotten to know the partnerships team, but you're only going to get out of a relationship what you put into it. And so you've really got to be invested. People say to me, does it take a lot of time? No, it doesn't. Especially when you have a blueprint with the events that I now do. I've got a blueprint which we've perfected over time and time. It's trial and error, like everything. But it can be quite intense for that sort of 2-3 months before an event, and then a few weeks after, and then it's done, and I feel good because I get to Christmas and I go, well, I reflect on the year. Yes, we were profitable. Yes, this is how many new clients. Yes, this is how much we grew. But I also over here was able to do something that personally means a lot to me, and sharing that vision with our clients and our community and my team. Certainly, keeps us motivated to come back and keep going with that partnership.
I'm really excited to hear about, I guess, the difference between how it might work. And actually, let me reframe that question. What is the key? What are the key elements of what creates a sustainable community, and does that relate to business?
Oh, geez. Okay, this is a big question. I mean, there's probably some factual data as to what does. I don't know. This is a tough one, Lisa. I think when I look at it just from my own level, I certainly think having access to capital. So the Hunger Project will provide that through microfinance loans. Having access to education. Having access to sanitation, having access to the resources that are needed to create that change. And I think it all starts with education. And for me, education and capital together can then affect the rest of the change that's needed. Because education will help mindset, education will help skill, education will help business, education will provide structure and knowledge. And I think all those things are really important to mindset. And then mindset then leads to, okay, now that we're in the right frame of mind, we've got the tools and the skills needed. We now need the money and the capital to do it. And so that's where the microfinance lending comes into it.
And what do they typically buy with the microfinance?
Look, some of them are already seasoned entrepreneurs. So you could have somebody who owns a patch of land, and on that land they've got a couple of let's say goats that create milk, or, that they're able to, produce milk, goat's milk, and it helps them to diversify. They might be able to then buy another block of land to expand, or, buy, I guess a small shop that they can set up to sell, other things. And so these economies are created through whether they diversify or are startups in business. But it's all about that generational change, because whatever they create, then they can bring their own family into that business and grow. Recently, one of the things that I thought was quite amazing was in the community we were funding in Charlo. They set up a community hall where they would have all of the community events. And with some money, they went and bought these plastic chairs. And these plastic chairs, they bought quite a bulk amount of them. But what they now do is they lease out these chairs to surrounding towns for when they've got events, because those towns don't have plastic chairs. And so they hire them out. And from that little tiny business idea, they now have a plastic chair hire business in this town for other towns. And so, just that was one example of how they use some of their money. Whether it's ambulances. I mean, for me, one of the most confronting things whilst in Malawi was knowing how many women that were pregnant. There was no maternity ward in the town that we were funding. And so they'd have to walk, sometimes very, very long distances, putting themselves and their babies at risk. And so being able to provide now a maternity facility has been a huge thing. Being able to provide ambulances, for people who are really ill. There's a lot of things that they're able to use the money for.
It's really cool. And I think there's a lot of different new business models that are happening as well, definitely with connection to the internet and having 5G speeds and blockchain and diversifying and decentralizing a lot of access to different resources. I'm certainly seeing. I'm interested in how it relates to food specifically as well, because I guess having an income allows you to have food. I have heard a lot of different stories about developing nations, and it might be fishing, and they rely on fishing for food in a community, and there's places that are definitely overfished. And so I heard a story of a business that actually created a dynamic way to be able to pay fishermen for collecting data and having a dynamic fishing index. And so if the area is overfished, then the warning sign goes up and they get paid to go out and collect data for the day. And I think different technologies and different business models will certainly help with that. How specifically have you seen it relating to food?
Look, I think for us, the biggest thing that I saw being produced on the trip to Malawi was a plant, the moringa plants. And I mean, we know that moringa has been used a lot in health, in treatment cancer and all sorts of things for medications. And, the food banks, again, I guess where it was quite a challenge for some of these communities was where they'd have, the crop and they'd be able to have supplies, but then because they didn't have a proper food bank to store it, the crops would be ruined when they'd have bad weather. And so again, being able to provide them with the funding and the facilities they've needed to create these storage banks and food banks where they can store their crops means that they could, have food for the rest of the year because it's all very seasonal. And so seeing the concept of how the food banks work was, again, quite mind-blowing as to how they keep track of whose crops are, whose crops they all belong to in these food banks. I mean, we actually went into one and I was just looking at these barrels and barrels and, big bags of moringa. And they said, yeah, we've had a really good season. And that was the town that we went to where they actually had a food bank. So we didn't really see much in terms of fishing or anything like that. It was more the crops, the moringa crop was a big thing in Malawi.
That's just reminded me, I've invested just recently in a technology there based here in Sydney, and it's parametric weather insurance for farmers. And when you talk about crops, there's a lot of disastrous weather, and the way insurance works at the moment is that you insure a crop, and if anything happens to that crop, then you might get an assessor out 2 or 3 months later, and then they might pay some money. But this is actually parametric, so it's in agreed terms. If the weather goes a degree or 2 degrees above what's going to ruin a crop versus the same either way, or if there's a hurricane or something that happens, then based on those metrics, the farmers are automatically paid. And I think some of those new technologies that can really help farmers, particularly in communities like that, where they've set up and they've spent all of this effort in creating a sustainable community, and then something out of their control comes along and takes potentially their way of living away.
Yeah, and I mean, that's where their insurance really is the food bank, being able to store it there rather than have all these little bags of moringa stored in these little huts where they were subject to bad weather, theft, and all sorts of other things. So, yeah.
Interesting. So I've got a couple of quick-fire questions for you. Are you ready?
Hopefully ready.
Some of these are borrowed from the lovely Tim Ferriss, who in Tribe of Mentors asked the same people the same questions, which I thought was really great. And I think the world can definitely be changed by asking better questions. So the first one is, what are 1 to 3 books that have greatly influenced your life?
1 to 3 books. Definitely The Alchemist, I love. The second one would be Brené Brown. I mean, that's sort of Dare to Lead, I've loved. And the third book, I've read some awesome books in my time. Let's stick with those 2 for now.
And what gift have you given for less than $100 most often?
I had these books actually that I gave out, which were a gift to a lot of our clients a few years ago, and they were under $100. But what I loved about them was each book that I purchased meant that there'd be a $10,000 grant given to a small entrepreneur that wanted to start a purpose-led business.
Excellent. If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, what would it say and why?
Oh, what would it say and why? I would think it would say, don't think it, just do it.
Excellent. What is an unusual habit or absurd thing that you love?
Wine? Is that absurd? No, that's probably quite normal, but I do love reading about wine regions when I've got some time. I don't know why I find that, reading about vintology, but I have this retirement dream to own my own little wine bar as a hole in the wall where creatives can come and write their books.
Very great. And I'd love to ask you, are there any actions that you would love for our listeners to take?
Again, like what I said on the billboard, if you are thinking about doing anything, don't let the fear or the uncertainty or the technical get in the way. I think find something that you're passionate about. That's the most important thing. That doesn't always come very easily. I thought I was passionate about a number of charities until I met the Hunger Project. So do your research. It doesn't have to be huge. I think just start with a small goal and just let the magic happen. You just don't know where it can take you.
That's so wonderful. And Nancy, I have one final question. Is there any final thoughts that you'd love to leave our listeners with?
Again, I think we're all capable of a lot of change, and it all starts with belief.
Nancy, thank you so much for joining us on Scaling Impact and helping to inspire us to take action towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to Scaling Impact. Make sure you subscribe to the show in your podcatcher, and we'd be super grateful if you leave us a great review. For more information about Scaling Impact, the Entrepreneurs Organisation, or our work on sustainable innovation, please check out EO Sydney online. We would appreciate if you can take a moment to share the podcast with a friend or a colleague and help build the movement. We hope that what we learn together on Scaling Impact can help us all build a sustainable future for ourselves and our children. See you in the near future.